Now that we've talked about the various aspects of .NET, kind of done the 50,000-foot view on the .NET framework, let's focus in now on the part of the framework that creates ASP.NET or exposes ASP.NET to us. Now, I've already mentioned that the framework's divided into namespaces, and the namespaces that affect ASP.NET directly. First of all is the system.web namespace. Now, this contains the classes that we use to provide all of our World Wide Web connections and functionality. Now, the one people probably are the most familiar with, if they have prior ASP experience, is the request and response objects that we used then. Those guys are still here, but they're actually now properties of some classes. But inside the system.web namespace, there's a number of classes that we use, that we instantiate objects off of, and then call methods and properties to manipulate and get that functionality. There is a system.web caching, and obviously this is going to handle all the caching issues with our web pages. So what you see here is you develop the ability to think, let's see, I need to do some caching here. And so you can go out to the documentation and look at the system.web caching namespace, and it will give you a list of all the classes that are in there and a brief description of what they do. And I will tell you, documentation leaves a bit to be desired yet for Microsoft. There is a lot of excellent third-party books out there, though, that can help you with this, and IntelliSense and just general familiarity will help you kind of hack your way through on this code, and you'll be up and running in no time. System.web.security, that namespace holds classes for all of our security aspects of .NET, and of course this is authorization and authentication of users. The system.web.session_state is what we use to handle our session state actions amongst our web pages. There's the system web UI, and this is probably the one that you use the most often. Now, you don't necessarily consciously think, oh, this is what I'm going to use, but this is what exposes the controls to us. These classes are what creates our interfaces. Now, a lot of these things are shared classes, which means we don't necessarily have to instantiate objects. Some of this is happening in the background. When we're in design mode in Visual Studio and we drag a button onto a web form, we have then used one of these classes to instantiate this object that we wanted, and then we have access to its events and properties and methods and so forth. There's a system.web.ui HTML controls, and this has classes for the HTML controls. We'll talk about those a little bit later on. Then there's system.web.ui.web controls, and this namespace has classes for the web controls, and those we'll spend a fair amount of time on in an upcoming video. So as you can tell, as we went through these, there's only about 6 or 7 namespaces that we need to be familiar with. Now this greatly helps you get your hands around learning this system, because the classes and everything that you need are lumped into these few namespaces, and so at least you have a really good idea of where to go begin looking for the functionality you need. Now I can't stress enough, spend some time in the documentation here. Now this is not like a John Grisham book. It's not going to keep you on the edge of your seat. If it does, you may want to see about getting a little bit more of a life. But as you read through this stuff, print this stuff out, take it with you, and when you're on hold, when you're in traffic, when you're waiting on somebody at the mall or whatever, just kind of read through these classes, because what will happen inevitably is at a later date you'll be working on a project and you think, man, I wish I knew how to do some action. And it'll occur to you, oh, wait a minute, I read that somewhere. And there's a class out there that does what you're trying to do. And so you just need to go exploit that class. And all that code is pre-written. It's out there ready, just waiting for you to call some methods and properties and so forth. So that's the ASP.NET namespaces. You'll become familiar with those as we go through here. You might want to keep in mind that if I want to use a system web UI web control in a page, then I have to import this namespace. And by importing the namespace, it exposes those classes to me, and I can then create objects and use that functionality. So that's the ASP.NET namespaces. Make friends with them. They will help you quite a bit.